Welcome back, everyone, to Tenipoy Actual Speaking. I am so happy that you are joining me back once again. My name is Jennifer Clyde. Today it is time for lesson 13, and we'll be talking about transportation. Now, especially public transportation. Now, what do you think of Korea? I think it is one of the easiest countries to get around, especially even for foreigners. They come to Korea, and with the subway system, they're very happy. They can get to wherever they want to go without much problems. Now, anyone who lives in an area with public transportation may have their own stories. Each transportation system has their own quirks. But first of all, do you drive? Or do you plan to buy a car or get a driver's license? You may take the bus, the train, the subway. You may even drive to work. But today, let's talk about all the different kinds of public transportation. Are you ready? Let's get started. So once again, today's topic is public transportation, and to tell you a bit about myself, I do own a car, but it has been sitting in front of my house for about the past 2 to maybe 3 months. That is because I plan to purchase a new car and get rid of my old car. So I have been taking public transportation, taxis mostly, but yeah, I have taken the subway and buses as well. So what about you? Do you have a car, but also leave your car at home because, you want to take public transportation to either save money or time, especially when you go from home to work and back home? It is true that a lot of people these days are giving up their cars. Of course, for many reasons, but I would say that is a huge slice of freedom to give up. Anyhow, with all of that in mind, let's begin by brainstorming with, of course, the 5 W's and how. Now, this is a practice for you all to remember. Keep the 5 W's and how in mind and brainstorm the Q's. It will help you when you actually have a conversation or when you do an interview about any topic, all right? Then let's begin with the first W, which happens to be who, as you all may know. So who do you take public transportation with? Okay, let's talk about who you do that with. Of course, in many cases, you would take public transportation by yourself. But sometimes, if you have a coworker or a school friend that lives nearby, you may even take public transportation together. So for example, it may be a school friend or school friends or a coworker or coworkers. All right, moving on to our next W is what. So what type of transport do you use? Transport is just short for transportation, okay? So what type of transportation do you use? You may use a subway or a bus or the bus, a cab, also known as a taxi. You may take the train. You may carpool. You all know what carpooling is. Basically, you are sharing a car with someone. So if you and your friend both own cars, but of course, you have the same destination, there's no reason for you to take 2 cars. Leave 1 car at home and share a car. That is carpooling. What else do you do? Do you drive yourself? Or also talk about what type of transportation you usually or occasionally use, okay? Let's brainstorm on. Now, when you use public transport, talk about that. So, keep in mind, when you usually take public transport, since when you have been taking the bus or the subway, since when you have been walking to school or to work, talk about the last time you took public transportation. Do you usually take it in the mornings or in the afternoons or, of course, in the evenings after work is done or even past midnight? It may cost a bit more to take a cab past midnight because subways and buses usually don't run until that late. So you can also talk about that, all right? Moving on to our next W, which is where. Now, to which places do you take public transportation? Now, to which places do you prefer to take public transport? When you go to the mall, when you go to crowded places like amusement parks? Or what about the park? Yeah, because it may be difficult to find a parking space at a park, so you can talk about that. when you go on trips, when you go to the markets, or when you go to work. All right, let's move on. Also, where are the bus stops? Where are the subway stations? Where are the taxi stands and train stations located? Where are they? Now, keep in mind, when it comes to bus stops, you take a bus at a bus stop, okay? And when it comes to subways, you take subways at subway stations. And over here, taxis. You catch taxis at taxi stands, also called taxi stops, and also train stations. So keep these in mind. They're not always the same. They change depending on what kind of transport you are talking about. Now, why? Why you take public transport? To save money, to save time, or to avoid traffic. Definitely. A lot of people take public transportation to avoid traffic, especially during the rush hours, morning and evening rush hours. You may not have a car, so you can say, I don't own a car, so I take public transport. You don't know how to drive. You don't have a driver's license. Also, mainly I would say for convenience reasons. Now, a lot of people choose to take public transport for these reasons. Think about why you take public transport. Okay, now moving on to our last segment, which is how. So how long is the walk to the station or the bus stop or the taxi stand? Talk about that. Now, you can talk about how long the ride is, okay? How long it takes you to get to your destination. Talk about that. Or also, how long is your commute? Commute. We often say 출퇴근 in Korean, right? You can also commute to work and also to school. Commute is basically the time that it takes to get from one place to another and to get back home from that place. So usually commutes take about a minimum of 20 to 30 minutes. If it's only 10 minutes, it is not called a commute. Keep that in mind. All right, we are done with the first how long. We have how many times do you have to transfer or switch the mode of transport, okay? Transfer and switch. Or how many stops do you have to go? On the subway or the bus, how many stops do you have to go? Moving on to our next how much time or money can you save? How much money do you spend monthly on transportation? Talk about that as well. And finally, let's move on to how often. How often do you use public transport? On a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or a monthly basis? Okay, some may use the bus or the train or the subway every single day, but it's different for you and me. So talk about how often you use public transport as well. Okay, we are done brainstorming our cues, so let's now move on with these expressions and cues in mind and listen to today's actual talk.
God, I love public transportation.
You do?
Well, yes, actually. Despite some of the problems with it, crowded with too many people,
Right.
I really love being able to avoid the rush hour traffic in the early morning.
Yeah, so what would you say your daily commute is like then?
Well, if I'm coming in the morning in the rush hour period, I try to take the subway.
Okay.
And I'll have to drive to the subway park, take the subway in,
Okay.
and then use a taxi or something to get where I'm going.
Okay.
But it's really quite convenient.
Yeah. How long would you say your commute is?
This morning it took me a little over an hour and a half to get here.
Okay. Would it have taken longer if you chose a different way to get here?
I think if I drove, it can take anywhere from 40 minutes to 2 hours.
Okay, so depending on the time and how heavy the traffic
And
is.
how heavy the traffic is, yeah.
I see.
What about you? What's your daily commute like?
Well, my daily commute is quite simple. It's a little bit more simple than yours. I just have to take either the subway or maybe just the bus to get to school or get to work. And it's really fast. For me, it takes only about maybe half an hour to get from point A to point B during my daily commute. And, although I wish I had a car, I know that it's a lot cheaper to take public transportation. So,
Yeah, with the price of gas and difficulties with parking, it's just a disaster.
that's true. But since you do have a car, Peter, when do you like to use it? When do you use it the most?
For shopping.
For shopping.
When you're buying a lot of things, you need a way to carry it home, and that's the most convenient. Although parking at some place like, the big convenience stores is
Right.
really difficult sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. And sometimes when you want to go into the really touristy areas, it's always best to just take public transportation. Because, like you said, parking is a disaster here in Korea
Yeah.
sometimes.
It can be a daily grind getting to and from work.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Did you listen carefully? Now, Rachel and Peter were talking about how often they use public transportation. What did Peter say? He said that he owns a car. He has a car and he drives it occasionally, but he loves public transport in Korea. It's so easy to get around and it's very, very convenient. Now, Rachel said that she wishes she had a car, which means she doesn't have a car, and she also uses public transport, usually the bus or the subway. So let's take a look at the conversation line by line. All right, now Peter begins by saying, God, I love public transportation. And he was not being sarcastic, he was being honest. He said, I love public transport. And he says, despite some of the problems with it, meaning although there are problems with public transportation, it's crowded with too many people, I really love being able to avoid the rush hour traffic in the early morning. So he's saying, of course, there are the ups and downs. It's really crowded. It's jam-packed. There's so many people on the subways or public transport, but he really loves being able to avoid the rush hour traffic in the mornings. To avoid, so he's saying, I don't have to worry about being stuck in traffic driving, right? Now, Rachel says, yes, so what would you say your daily commute is like then? Now, as I did mention, a commute is a travel regularly over some distance. So, for example, you may travel from a city to the suburbs regularly. You do it on a regular basis, and that is a commute. Usually takes longer than 20 minutes. A 10-minute ride to and from is not called a commute, so keep that in mind. Moving on, well, Peter says, well, if I'm coming in the morning, that's not a mistake, that's true. When I'm coming in the morning, come in the morning, in the rush hour period, I try to, take the subway. And I'll have to drive to the subway. So what does he do? He drives to the subway, and then he parks, and then he takes the subway in. And then, he says he uses a taxi or something to get where he's going. Wow, that's a lot of information. It may sound very, very complicated, but let's take a look once again. When is this happening? In the rush hour period, when there's a lot of traffic during rush hours, he tries to take the subway. So, in order to take the subway, what does he do? He drives to the subway station and he parks his car and then he takes the subway in, meaning he comes in. Or you can also go out on the subway and then, use a taxi or something. So he's driving, then he takes a subway, and then he takes a taxi to get around. All right, and he says, but it's really quite convenient. So talk about what kind of transport you use and talk about the perks, the good things about it, the convenience, okay? Now, how long would you say your commute is? So let's talk about how long a commute could be. Now, Peter says this morning, it took me a little over an hour and a half to get here. So he may have taken the subway and it took him how long? An hour and a half. And then Rachel asks once again, would it have taken longer if you chose a different way to get here? Perhaps. He said that he took the subway, but she's asking, well, would it have taken longer if you took a cab, if you drove, if you took the bus or a train? And what did he say? He said, I think if I drove, okay, if he brought his car or if he drove, it can take anywhere from 40 minutes to 2 hours. So when you're not exactly saying, oh, it takes 1 hour, it takes 30 minutes, it can take approximately 20 minutes or even 2 hours. This is a great pattern. Take anywhere from 40 minutes to 2 hours, meaning it could take 40 minutes at least and at max 2 hours, okay? Moving on, so Rachel says, so depending on the time and how heavy the traffic is, the time is different. It takes longer sometimes and it takes shorter sometimes. Now he says, yeah, how heavy the traffic is. What about you? And then he asks her about her daily commute. She says, my daily commute is quite simple. It's not as complicated because Peter was talking about taking all sorts of public transport. She says it's a little bit more simple than yours. Now, of course, this is what Rachel said, but more simple is incorrect. You should say simpler, okay? So she should have said it's a little bit simpler than yours. Her commute is simpler than Peter's. I just have to take either the subway or maybe just the bus, okay, to get to where she's going for work or even school. And for me, it takes only, she's saying it does not take that long, about maybe half an hour to get from point A to point B, okay, to get from school from home, to get to work from home, okay, during my daily commute. And you know, although I wish I had a car, okay, which means she doesn't have a car, although I wish I had a car, I know that it's a lot cheaper to take public transportation. You don't ride public transportation, you always take public transportation, so keep that in mind. And then Peter says, yeah, with the price of gas and difficulties with parking, it's just a disaster. So he's saying that it could be a disaster to travel, especially when you have your own car. Let's move on. Now, that's true, but since you do have a car, Peter, when do you like to use it? So let's talk about when, okay? She says, when do you use it the most? Let's find out. For shopping, okay. For shopping, he uses his car. He drives, right? When you're getting or buying a lot of things, you need a place or perhaps a way to carry everything home, and that's the most convenient. Although parking at some place like, you know, the big convenience stores is really difficult sometimes. So he's talking about how parking can be difficult, but still, since he has to find a way to carry everything that he has shopped, he chooses to take his car. Now, moving on. That's true. And sometimes, okay, when you want to go into the really touristy areas, what is a touristy area? Do you remember? A tourist is what? Someone that's foreign to one country that's looking around. But a touristy area is an area that's most likely crowded with tourists, okay? It's always best to just take public transportation because, like you said, parking is a disaster, meaning it's very difficult, okay? It's difficult to park here in Korea sometimes. And of course, Peter finally says, yeah, it can be a daily grind getting to and from work. So a daily grind, what is a grind? Okay, a grind as a noun in Korean is 맷돌, right? And to grind as a verb means to, grind it into small particles. 갈다라는 뜻이잖아요. But in this case, a daily grind could basically mean something that is monotonous, something that happens over and over and over again. It's very boring and could be troublesome. So he's saying it can be a daily grind getting to and from work. It can be really tiresome getting to and from work. All right, well, that is a wrap for today's actual talk. Have a listen to it one more time with the subtitles.
God, I love public transportation.
You do?
Well, yes, actually. Despite some of the problems with it, crowded with too many people,
Right.
I really love being able to avoid the rush hour traffic in the early morning.
Yeah, so what would you say your daily commute is like then?
Well, if I'm coming in the morning in the rush hour period,
Mm-hmm.
I try to take the subway.
Okay.
Um, and I'll have to drive to the subway park, take the subway in, and
Okay.
then use a taxi or something to get where I'm going.
Okay.
But it's really quite convenient.
Yeah. How long would you say your commute is?
This morning it took me a little over an hour and a half to get here.
Okay. Would it have taken longer if you chose a different way to get here?
I think if I drove, it can take anywhere from 40 minutes to 2 hours.
Okay, so depending on the time and how heavy the traffic
And how
is.
heavy the traffic is, yeah.
I see.
What about you? What's your daily commute like?
Well, my daily commute is quite simple. It's a little bit more simple than yours. I just have to take either the subway or maybe just the bus to get to school or get to work. And it's really fast. For me, it takes only about maybe half an hour to get from point A to point B during my daily commute. And, although I wish I had a car, I know that it's a lot cheaper to take public transportation. So,
Yeah, with the price of gas and difficulties with parking, it's just a disaster.
that's true. But since you do have a car, Peter, when do you like to use it? When do you use it the most?
For shopping.
For shopping.
When you're buying a lot of things, you need a way to carry it home, and that's the most convenient. Although parking at some place like, the big convenience stores
Right.
is really difficult sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. And sometimes when you want to go into the really touristy areas, it's always best to just take public transportation. Because, like you said, parking is a disaster here in Korea
Yeah.
sometimes.
It can be a daily grind getting to and from work.
Okay, everyone, did you listen to the actual talk carefully? Okay, now it's time for us to move on to our actual talk expressions. Let's take a look at some useful expressions you can use in the future when you talk about today's topic, public transportation. So let's talk about your average commute, your daily commute, how you travel from one place to another. But since we're calling it a commute, it means that you're traveling from one place to another on a regular basis, perhaps from home to work, or from home to school and then back home. So you can say, my conventional mode of transportation is the subway. Basically, you're saying my average mode of transportation is the subway. This is what you usually take, okay? Another expression you can make use of is I carpool, or I hitch a ride with a coworker. Now, we talked about carpooling. I'm sure you all know what carpooling is. Hitching a ride with someone means the same thing as carpooling. Now, hitch a ride, right? What do? Oftentimes, you're on the road, you may watch movies, and someone says, and they're hitching a ride. They're asking someone to stop, take me with you, give me a ride, drop me off somewhere. So hitch in this case is basically it alludes to walking, I guess, unevenly. You're walking, looking back for a car, and you're walking and looking back for a truck to give you a ride. That is to hitch a ride, to ask for a ride. So once again, if you share a car with someone, you can say, I carpool with a coworker, or I hitch a ride with someone. Okay, keep that pattern in mind. Moving on, I take the subway out and take a cab in. Right. Sometimes you may go to work on foot and then come back home by bus. You may use different kinds of public transport. You can make use of this pattern. So once again, in the beginning, when you go from home to work, you take the subway, and when you come back home from work, you take a taxi. You can say, I take the subway out and take a cab in, okay? Moving on. I take the bus to and from work. Now, if you take the same kind of public transport from one place to another and then back, you can use to and from. Oops, sorry. Take something to and from. So, I take the bus to and from work. I take the subway to and from work. I walk to and from work. You can also say that, all right? Moving on, your usual mode of transport. It's very similar, but it may not be public transportation. For example, you can say, I usually jump behind the wheel. Now, this is an idiomatic expression. It means to drive. We often call the steering wheel a wheel or a steering wheel. We don't call it a handle in the car. So you're saying I jump behind the wheel, meaning I drive to move around, to get around. Another one, I drive. I take the bus to get around. To move around and to get around means the same thing. It means to travel around, okay? All right, moving on. Your usual mode of transport. Continuing on, you can say there aren't any subway stations near my house. There aren't any, so you can say I have no choice but to take the bus, okay? So since there are no subway stations near your house, you can take the bus, you can take a taxi, or if there are any bus stops, you can take the subway, okay? Let's move on. Buses run by my house. They come by, they run by my house every 5 minutes, okay? Buses may come every 3 minutes, sometimes every 15 minutes. Talk about how often these buses come, okay? Let's move on. Let's talk about rush hours. I'd much rather take the subway during the busy hours, meaning the busy rush hours. Also, the morning rush hour is a daily battle. It's a daily nightmare. It's a daily disaster. These are all what? Oh, very, very difficult. You don't want to experience these. So you're talking about the rush hour, how it is a daily, it happens over and over and over again every day. It's very difficult. So try using words such as battle, disaster, or even nightmare, things you want to avoid. Moving on, during rush hours on subways, everyone is crammed or packed cheek to cheek. What is a cheek? A cheek is this part, 볼. What does that mean? Crammed, cheek to cheek means everyone is stuck together, so close to each other because, the subway or the buses are so crowded, so packed, so crammed. Everyone is squeezed together, okay? Now moving on, we do have jam-packed. Crowded bus rides can be unbearable. They're intolerable. You cannot bear them. They're so difficult, so you want to avoid them. Try using jam-packed. Crowded means the same thing as crammed, okay? All right. Now moving on, we have quickly what's economical. Now, it's much more economical to take the bus than drive, meaning you can save money and time, right? Taking a taxi every day really adds up. Now, to add means to write, to total something, a total sum. But if you say it adds up, meaning it can cost a lot of money in the end. And since taxis cost a bundle means cost a lot of money. I usually take the subway or bus, okay? Let's check out one more very quickly. I use a transportation card, 교통카드죠, okay? And the fare amounts are paid off. Pay off, do you remember? It means to pay something all off, okay? When? On my credit card payment date. So you use your transportation card, you scratch it, you swipe it, and then at the end of the month, you pay for what? All the fare amounts all at once on your credit card payment date. Okay, so these are some expressions you can use when talking about public transportation. Keep them in mind, and here is the actual talk one more time.
God, I love public transportation.
You do?
Well, yes, actually. Despite some of the problems with it, crowded with too many people,
Right.
I really love being able to avoid the rush hour traffic in the early morning.
Yeah, so what would you say your daily commute is like then?
Well, if I'm coming in the morning in the rush hour period, I try to take the subway.
Okay.
And I'll have to drive to the subway park, take the subway in,
Okay.
and then use a taxi or something to get where I'm going.
Okay.
But it's really quite convenient.
Yeah. How long would you say your commute is?
This morning it took me a little over an hour and a half to get here.
Okay. Would it have taken longer if you chose a different way to get here?
I think if I drove it can take anywhere from 40 minutes to 2 hours.
Okay, so depending on the time and how heavy the traffic
And
is.
how heavy the traffic is, yeah.
I see.
What about you? What's your daily commute like?
Well, my daily commute is quite simple. It's a little bit more simple than yours. I just have to take either the subway or maybe just the bus to get to school or get to work. And it's really fast. For me, it takes only about maybe half an hour to get from point A to point B during my daily commute. And, although I wish I had a car, I know that it's a lot cheaper to take public transportation. So,
Yeah, with the price of gas and difficulties with parking, it's just a disaster.
that's true. But since you do have a car, Peter, when do you like to use it? When do you use it the most?
For shopping.
For shopping.
When you're buying a lot of things, you need a place, a way to carry it home, and that's the most convenient. Although parking at some place like, the big convenience stores
Right.
is really difficult sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. And sometimes when you want to go into the really touristy areas, it's always best to just take public transportation. Because, like you said, parking is a disaster here in Korea
Yeah.
sometimes.
It can be a daily grind getting to and from work.
Welcome back, everyone. It is time for us to kind of relax and take a breather, take a quick break with an idiom related to today's topic. We, of course, are talking about public transport. We've been talking about taking the train, the subway, the bus. You may even fly to certain places. You may bike or even walk, meaning go from one place to another on foot. So today's idiom is drive someone up the wall. Drive someone up the wall. Now, drive in this case, what do you think it means? Of course, to drive means a lot of things. As a verb, it means to drive a car. Also, as a noun, it can be motivation, that force that helps you do something, right? Perhaps achieve a goal, that is also called a drive. But here it's used as a verb. So what do you think it means? I'll give you a sentence. She drove me up the wall with her complaints. I was so mad that I wanted to pull my hair out. Now, what kind of feeling are you getting? I was so mad that I wanted to pull my hair out. It means you were so frustrated. You were so irritated. You were so angry, you wanted to pull your hair out. So in the first sentence, she drove me up the wall with her complaints. It means she really, really frustrated me. Now, the definition of drive someone up the wall is 누군가를 매우 화나게 하다, 짜증나게 하다. Okay, in English it is to make someone extremely angry, to frustrate or to irritate. Here is another sample sentence using drive up the wall. Now, I've been trying to untangle this necklace for the past hour and it's driving me up the wall. This actually happened to me about a month and a half ago. I bought a necklace, actually 3 very thin necklaces, and somehow they all got tangled up. 다 엉켜버렸어요. I was trying to untangle the necklaces for about an hour and a half, and it really, really was driving me up the wall. I got so frustrated. But of course, I succeeded in untangling them, so all good in the end. Everyone, so try using this expression, idiomatic expression, drive someone up the wall in the future. All right, that's all for now.
What type of transportation do you take on a regular basis? What is your most common mode of transportation? Talk about which type of public transportation you prefer. What is your daily commute like? Describe some interesting experiences from your commutes.
I usually take buses or subways because I don't have a car. But I usually prefer taking subways to taking buses. First of all, taking subway is very nice when I have to be exact on time. Since I have most of the classes in the morning, I usually take subway in the morning to get in the class right on time. But one bad thing about subway is sometimes it is too crowded in the subway. The air is really bad, and maybe I would have to stand up for 1 hour. And There was one episode when I took the subway. I couldn't get off the subway because there were too many people in the subway when I had to get off. But there are some times when I take buses too. I take buses when the weather is really nice and when I want to enjoy the beautiful scenery outside, I take buses.
So our question was, of course, related to taking public transportation, and I think that was a wonderful interview. Let's take a look at some great points and some tiny mistakes that she made. First of all, the good points. Great. I think you did a wonderful job here. She said, I usually, okay, you're talking about your usual mode of transport. I usually take buses or subways because I don't have a car. Okay, she's saying that she doesn't have a car, she doesn't drive, so she usually, regularly takes buses or subways. And she also talks about her preference. I prefer taking subways to taking buses, okay? Keep that in mind. You take something, but when you prefer doing something, you always have to keep this part in mind. I prefer taking subways to taking buses. You can also say the subway or the buses, okay? Moving on to another great point. I take buses when the weather is really nice, okay? So this is a time that she takes public transport and when I want to enjoy the beautiful scenery outside. So first of all, she said she usually takes buses or subways, but in number 2, she says she takes buses when, right? The weather is really nice and when I want to enjoy the beautiful scenery outside. She's talking about when she takes a certain kind of transport, different situations, right? So great job there. Let's check out a few oopsies. The first one is taking subway is very nice when I have to be exact on time. Now, taking subway, one tiny mistake here is you should have said taking the subway, taking a taxi, taking a bus or the bus, okay? And on the bottom part, be exact on time. That somehow sounds awkward, right? Well, I changed it. Taking the subway, okay, is very nice when I have to be exactly on time. You have to be exactly on time, not exact on time. So these are small, minor errors that you can fix. Let's check out one more. The air is really bad and maybe I would have to stand up for 1 hour. So we have stand up and the air is really bad. That part is wonderful. Let's check it out. Okay, you can either say the air is really bad and sometimes I have to stand for 1 hour. Now the difference here is to stand up. Okay, usually you ask someone to stand up. 일어나세요, right? You're telling someone to get up. And also to stand means 서 있다, 서다. So there is a slight difference. When you say that you have to stand for an hour, of course, avoid saying stand up, but rather stand. Or if you want to use stand up, you can say the air is really bad and sometimes I have to ride the subway for 1 hour standing up. That is another option, okay? So usually you say you have to stand for 1 hour or you have to do something standing up. 그 상태로 무엇을 하다라고 할 때는 이렇게도 가능합니다. Okay, so that is a wrap for today's actual interview. Great job once again. You know, we did talk about different modes of transportation today, but it's true that a lot of people are more concerned about going green, protecting the environment. So perhaps you can walk to work, take a bike to work. But it's true there aren't enough bicycle roads and it's not as safe. Well, we'll have to do something about that in the near future, right? Okay, I do want to thank you all for joining me today. Next time, I'll be back with this topic, trends and fads. It'll be another fun lecture, so please do join me again. You are more than welcome to come to our homepage at ebse.co.kr. Just type in Tenny Poet Actual Speaking and leave some comments. Okay, until next time, take care and bye everyone.